In the remote wilderness of Montana's Glacier National Park, something impossible was happening. A wild bobcat had been sitting motionless beside his bed sibling for 6 days, refusing food, water, and any attempt at rescue, until one wildlife veterinarian tried something that changed everything. The morning mist clung to the rocky outcrop like a shroud, as Dr. Elena Vasquez crouched behind a fallen pine log, her weathered hands gripping a pair of binoculars. 30 feet away, beneath an ancient cedar tree, lay a scene that defied every principle of animal behavior she'd learned in her 22 years as a wildlife veterinarian. A male bobcat, his tawny coat matted with dirt and pine needles, sat hunched over the still form of another bobcat, this one smaller, clearly female. The surviving bobcat's amber eyes were sunken, rimmed with exhaustion. His ribs showed through his dull fur, evidence of days without eating. Park rangers had first spotted the pair 6 days ago, and since then, nothing had moved the grieving animal from his vigil. Not the approaching thunderstorms that had soaked him to the bone. Not the coyotes that had circled hungrily in the night, drawn by the scent of death. Not even the tranquilizer dart that Ranger Mike Harrison had reluctantly fired yesterday, which had somehow missed its mark when the bobcat had shifted at the last second. Dr. Vasquez lowered her binoculars and rubbed her tired eyes. The radio on her belt crackled with static before Mike's voice came through, edged with frustration. "Elena, we can't wait much longer. That cat's gonna die of dehydration if he doesn't move soon. And the body, it's been almost a week in this heat." She pressed the radio button, never taking her eyes off the tragic scene below. "I know, Mike, but something about this isn't adding up. In all my years studying wildcats, I've never seen grief behavior this intense. There's something more going on here." The surviving bobcat lifted his head slightly, and for a moment, Dr. Vasquez could have sworn he was looking directly at her through the trees. Those amber eyes held an intelligence, a desperate communication that made her chest tighten. He wasn't just mourning, he was protecting something, waiting for something, holding on to hope against all logic and instinct. The sight before Dr. Vasquez challenged everything she understood about bobcat behavior. These were solitary animals, territorial by nature, who rarely maintained close bonds beyond mating season. Yet here was a male bobcat displaying grief so profound it was literally killing him. She pulled out her field notebook, its pages already damp from the mountain humidity, and began sketching the scene while dictating into her voice recorder. Day 6 of observation, Glacier National Park, Sector 7. Male bobcats, approximately 2 to 3 years old, continued to maintain position beside deceased females of similar age. Subject has refused all food sources placed within reach, including fresh rabbit and ground squirrel. Water containers left nearby remain untouched. She paused, watching as the bobcat gently nuzzled the still form beside him. Most concerning is the subject's apparent disregard for basic survival instincts. Last night's temperature dropped to 38 degrees, yet he remained exposed rather than seeking shelter. Dr. Vasquez had seen grief in wild animals before, but nothing like this. Elephants mourning their dead, dolphins carrying deceased calves, even domestic cats showing signs of depression after losing companions. But this level of devotion, this refusal to abandon what was clearly beyond saving, suggested something far deeper than typical animal behavior. Through her binoculars, she studied the female bobcat's position. The body lay on its side, partially sheltered by the male's larger frame. Despite the days that had passed, there was something oddly peaceful about the scene, as if the surviving bobcat had carefully arranged his sister in a position of comfort. The thought struck her as both beautiful and heartbreaking. Mike's voice crackled through the radio again. "Elena, I've got the containment unit ready. Park supervisor wants this resolved by tomorrow morning. We're worried about disease transmission, and there's a hiking group scheduled to come through this area next week." She understood the concerns, but something nagged at her. In her experience, when animals displayed behavior this extreme, there was usually a reason beyond what appeared on the surface. The bobcat's eyes, when they briefly met hers through the scope, held a clarity that suggested he was making a conscious choice rather than acting on blind instinct. "Give me until tomorrow evening, Mike. I have an idea, but I need to observe them a little longer." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. 2 months earlier, the forests of Glacier National Park had been a paradise for wildlife. Late spring snowmelt filled every creek and stream, creating a network of crystal-clear waterways that supported abundant prey. The pine and fir trees stood tall and healthy, their branches heavy with new growth, providing perfect cover for the park's diverse predator population. Among these predators were 2 young bobcats who had recently left their mother's territory to establish their own. Aspen and River, as Dr. Vasquez would later name them from the park's trail camera footage, were siblings from the same litter born the previous spring. Unlike typical bobcat behavior, these 2 had remained together far longer than usual. Trail cameras positioned throughout Sector 7 had captured dozens of images of the pair moving through the forest in tandem, hunting cooperatively, and even sharing kills, something almost unheard of among adult bobcats. The footage revealed an extraordinary partnership. Aspen, the male, was larger and more aggressive in his hunting style, capable of taking down prey as large as young deer. River, the female, was smaller but possessed an uncanny ability to track wounded animals and locate hidden prey. Park biologists had observed them working together with the precision of a well-rehearsed team. Aspen would flush out rabbits and ground squirrels from dense undergrowth, while River positioned herself along likely escape routes, creating an almost foolproof hunting strategy. Their territory centered around a natural spring that fed into Whitefish Creek, an area rich with the small mammals and birds that formed the backbone of their diet. The siblings had established multiple den sites throughout their range, rotating between them seasonally and sharing each location without the territorial disputes that typically characterize bobcat relationships. Dr. Martin Webb, the park's senior wildlife biologist, had noted in his reports that their behavior suggested an unusually strong social bond, possibly the result of being separated from their mother earlier than normal. Camera trap images showed them engaging in behaviors more commonly seen in social cats like lions. They groomed each other regularly, slept in close physical contact, and even seemed to communicate through a complex series of vocalizations that went far beyond typical bobcat calls. Their hunting success rate was remarkable, nearly double that of solitary bobcats in the same region, suggesting that their partnership provided significant survival advantages. This idyllic existence continued through the summer months, with both cats growing strong and healthy on their shared territory. The first signs of trouble appeared in late August, when an unusual weather pattern brought record-breaking heat to the region. Temperatures soared above 90 degrees for 12 consecutive days, something virtually unprecedented in Glacier National Park's recorded history. The natural springs that had sustained abundant wildlife began to dry up, and the forest canopy, stressed by the extreme heat, offered little protection from the relentless sun. River began showing signs of distress during what should have been routine hunting expeditions. The smaller female, always the more agile of the 2 siblings, started moving with visible difficulty. Her usual graceful leaps between rocks became labored, and she began falling behind during their synchronized hunts. Aspen noticed the change immediately, adjusting their hunting patterns to accommodate his sister's declining stamina. Dr. Webb's automated cameras captured the progression of River's illness over several days. In one particularly telling sequence, River attempted to leap across a fallen log that she had previously navigated effortlessly, only to collapse midway and require Aspen's assistance to reach the other side. The male bobcat had nudged her gently with his head, a gesture of encouragement that spoke to their extraordinary bond. The extreme temperatures had triggered an outbreak of tick-borne illness throughout the park's wildlife population. Deer, elk, and smaller mammals all showed signs of the bacterial infection,
that spread rapidly through the ecosystem. River, being smaller and possibly more vulnerable due to an old injury visible on her left hind leg from the camera footage, succumbed to the infection more quickly than her larger, stronger sibling.
On the morning of August 28th, River collapsed near their primary den site beneath the ancient cedar. Aspen had been hunting alone, bringing back food for his increasingly weak sister, when he returned to find her lying motionless on her side. The cameras captured the moment of discovery, Aspen dropping the rabbit he'd carried and immediately moving to River's side. What happened next defied every known pattern of bobcat behavior. Instead of moving on, as survival instinct would dictate, Aspen settled beside his sister's still form and refused to leave. He carefully positioned himself so that his larger body provided shade and protection, even as the forest around them continued to bake under the unprecedented heat wave. The vigil had begun, and nothing would move him from River's side. What Dr. Vasquez observed through her binoculars over the following days revealed a level of emotional complexity in wild animals that challenged scientific understanding. Aspen's behavior went far beyond simple mourning or confusion about his sister's death. His actions demonstrated a deliberate, conscious choice to remain with River despite every survival instinct screaming at him to move on. The grieving bobcat had created what could only be described as a protective sanctuary around his sister's body. Using his powerful claws, he had carefully cleared away debris and loose rocks from the area, creating a clean, sheltered space beneath the cedar's massive trunk. He positioned River's body with extraordinary gentleness, adjusting her position several times until she appeared to be sleeping peacefully rather than lying in the awkward angles typical of death. Most remarkably, Aspen had begun what appeared to be ritualistic behavior around the site. Every morning at dawn, he would make a complete circuit of the area, marking specific trees and rocks with his scent. This wasn't territorial marking in the traditional sense, but something far more profound. Dr. Vasquez recognized it as similar to the way some indigenous cultures created sacred spaces, defining boundaries that were spiritual rather than territorial. The male bobcat's physical condition deteriorated rapidly, but his mental state seemed to grow more focused rather than confused. His amber eyes, though sunken from dehydration, remained alert and purposeful. When park rangers attempted to approach with food and water, Aspen would position himself directly over River's body, his message clear: he would not be separated from her, regardless of the consequences. On the fourth day, something extraordinary happened that Dr. Vasquez almost missed. A red-tailed hawk had begun circling overhead, drawn by the scent of death. Aspen, who barely had the strength to lift his head, somehow found the energy to stand and emit a warning call so powerful and grief-stricken that the hawk immediately veered away. Other scavengers that approached the area, including a pair of ravens and a curious coyote, received similar warnings and retreated without challenge. It became clear that Aspen wasn't just mourning his sister, he was actively protecting her from the natural processes of the forest. He had appointed himself as her guardian, refusing to allow nature to reclaim what he still considered sacred. This wasn't instinct or confusion. This was love, manifesting in its purest, most desperate form. Dr. Vasquez had witnessed countless examples of animal intelligence during her career, but nothing had prepared her for the depth of emotion she observed in Aspen's daily rituals. Each morning, the weakening bobcat would begin what she came to recognize as a grooming ceremony. Despite his own deteriorating condition, he would carefully clean River's fur with his rough tongue, working methodically from her head down to her tail, just as he had done when she was alive. The most heartbreaking aspect of these sessions was how Aspen would pause periodically, as if waiting for a response that would never come. He would gently nudge River's head with his nose, then wait several seconds before continuing his careful ministrations. During these pauses, his amber eyes would scan her face intently, searching for any sign of the life that had once animated his beloved sister. Park maintenance worker Sarah Crowfeather, a member of the local Blackfeet tribe, had been monitoring the situation from a respectful distance. Her grandfather had taught her that animals possessed souls just as complex as humans, and she recognized in Aspen's behavior something her people had observed for generations. "That cat isn't just grieving," she told Dr. Vasquez during one of their radio conversations. "He's performing the same rituals our ancestors did for their dead. He's keeping vigil so her spirit knows it's safe to travel on." By the 6th day, Aspen's physical decline had reached a critical point. His once muscular frame had become gaunt, his coat dull and lifeless. Yet his dedication never wavered. When thunderstorms rolled through the area, bringing the first relief from the oppressive heat, Aspen positioned his body to shield River from the rain. His own fur became soaked, but he ensured that she remained as dry as possible under their makeshift shelter. The most striking change was in his vocalizations. Bobcats are typically silent creatures, communicating primarily through scent and body language. But Aspen had begun making soft, almost melodic sounds that Dr. Vasquez had never heard from a wild cat. These weren't distress calls or territorial warnings, but something far more intimate. They resembled the gentle chattering sounds domestic cats make when completely content, as if he was still carrying on conversations with his sister, maintaining their lifelong bond even in death. His unwavering devotion had transformed what should have been a simple biological process into something that touched the very essence of what it means to love unconditionally. The crisis reached its breaking point on the 7th day, when Aspen collapsed during his morning ritual. Dr. Vasquez watched in horror through her binoculars as the exhausted bobcat struggled to lift his head, his legs trembling with the effort of simply remaining upright. His breathing had become shallow and irregular, and she could see that he was entering the early stages of organ failure brought on by severe dehydration and starvation. Park Supervisor James Mitchell's voice came through the radio with unprecedented urgency. "Elena, I'm authorizing immediate intervention. We can't let that animal die on our watch. The tranquilizer team is moving into position now." Dr. Vasquez felt her heart sink as she watched 3 rangers in protective gear approaching through the underbrush, their dart guns loaded and ready. But something extraordinary happened as the rangers closed in. Aspen, despite his weakened state, managed to drag himself fully on top of River's body, spreading his limbs wide to cover as much of her as possible. His message was unmistakable. If they wanted to take him, they would have to go through her first. The lead ranger, Tom Bradley, stopped in his tracks, clearly moved by the display of protective devotion. "Hold position," Dr. Vasquez radioed frantically. "I need 5 more minutes." She had been formulating a theory throughout her days of observation, one that challenged conventional approaches to wildlife rescue. Traditional methods focused on removing the animal from the source of distress, but what if the distress itself was the key to reaching him? Racing down the rocky slope with her medical kit, Dr. Vasquez made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. Instead of approaching Aspen directly, she knelt beside River's body and opened her veterinary bag. From it, she withdrew a small vial of glucose solution, and in a gesture that would have seemed absurd to any observer who didn't understand the deeper psychology at play, she carefully administered a few drops of the clear liquid into River's mouth, just as she would for a living animal suffering from hypoglycemia. Aspen's reaction was immediate and profound. He leaned forward, his nose almost touching Dr. Vasquez's hand, and for the first time in a week, he made a soft, questioning sound. "I know, boy," Dr. Vasquez whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know you want her to wake up. I wish I could make that happen." She continued the charade, checking River's pulse points and listening to her chest with the stethoscope, all while Aspen watched with desperate attention. After several minutes of this elaborate performance, Dr. Vasquez did something that surprised even herself. She gently closed River's eyes and placed her hand over the bobcat's heart in a gesture of finality. Then, looking directly into Aspen's amber eyes, she shook her head slowly and said, "I'm sorry. She's gone." The words seemed to break something inside the grieving bobcat. For the first time since beginning his vigil, Aspen stepped away from River's body. He moved only a few feet, but it was the first voluntary separation he had made. His legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the pine needle-covered ground, utterly spent. Dr. Vasquez seized the moment, quickly filling a syringe with electrolyte solution. But instead of approaching Aspen directly, she knelt beside River once more and gently inserted the needle into the deceased cat's fur, as if giving her a final injection. Only then did she turn to Aspen, showing him the same syringe. "Your turn," she said softly. "River would want you to live." The exhausted bobcat offered no resistance as Dr. Vasquez administered the life-saving fluids. It was as if her acknowledgement of River's death had finally given him permission to save himself. The transformation was immediate and miraculous. Within hours of receiving the IV fluids, Aspen began to show signs of recovery. Dr. Vasquez had transported him to the park's Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, but not before allowing him one final moment with River. She watched as he gently touched his nose to his sister's forehead in what could only be described as a goodbye kiss. 3 weeks later, Aspen had made a full physical recovery. But the real miracle came when Dr. Vasquez prepared to release him back into the wild. She had chosen a location near where River was buried, beneath that ancient cedar tree that had sheltered their final days together. As Aspen emerged from the transport carrier, he immediately went to the burial site, sitting quietly for several minutes in what appeared to be a moment of remembrance. Then, something extraordinary happened. Aspen looked back at Dr. Vasquez and made that same soft, questioning sound he had made during River's examination. But this time, it wasn't filled with desperation. It was filled with gratitude. He approached her slowly, touched his nose to her outstretched hand, and then disappeared into the forest. 6 months later, trail cameras captured images of Aspen thriving in his territory, hunting successfully, and showing all the signs of a healthy, wild bobcat. But every few weeks, he returns to that cedar tree, sitting quietly for a few minutes before moving on. Love, it seems, truly knows no boundaries, not even death. The bond between Aspen and River changed everything we thought we knew about animal emotions and the depth of sibling relationships in the wild. Their story reminds us that love, loyalty, and grief are not uniquely human experiences, but universal languages spoken by all creatures who form deep connections. If this incredible story of love and loss moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing wildlife stories that will change the way you see the natural world. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of unconditional love.